Hi, my name is Stereo Mike. Actually, it's not, it's Karl Bainbridge welcoming you back to INC Live and to the UFC 311 preview show. I'm joined by the man on the right hand side of my screen. He did nothing absolutely bupkis that day. It's Joe Neal. Joe, thank you very much for joining us.
To be here. I'm glad to, give me heart to the whole. I would say Hulk Hogan, but we did just get booed out of the arena, so maybe we don't want to be those guys this
Well,
week.
Hogan did. Jimmy was fine.
Yeah, that's fair. And they cheered Taker, so there's no political thing.
And there's our political tick done for the year then, Joe. We can never talk about it for the rest of 2025.
Yeah, we made a plan to just rip the Band-Aid off in January, and then we'll just move on. We're good for the year.
Yeah, until the Saudi shows come up.
Oh, yeah, then we have to talk.
But the place we are going to be, as you sort of alluded to there with the Brand Van 3000 reference, absolutely banger of a song, by the way. The UFC 311 is scheduled to be taking place in Los Angeles. Scheduled, I want to stress that because we will be talking about that in a little bit more detail. But I have to say though, Joe, looking at UFC 311 right now, the amount of times that we've come across the January pay-per-view and we've had to sit through Holly Holm, Jermaine Demandamy, Sean Strickland versus Dricus du Plessis, the UFC are really going out of their way to make UFC 311 the first card of the year an absolute banger. And I think one of the first things we need to talk about is, why do you think the UFC are choosing to make a big deal about this card? Is it the fact that LA is a big market for them? They want to make a big song and dance about being at the into it? Is it because they have two grappling heavy title fights and they want to sort of compensate for that? It just does seem very out of place for the UFC to make a big deal about the January show when previous years they haven't bothered.
Yeah, I remember in previous years, it was like, what's the most exciting thing? Well, Jermaine Demandamy was punching after the bell. That was kind of fun. In fairness, first part of the year, we've also had arguably the greatest lightweight title fight ever. Arguably, I say, because there's been a lot of really, really good ones in lightweight. Lightweight's insane. But you had a 125 with Frankie and Gray Maynard. So that card is, very good. It's okay, but the main event's very good. So that's kind of what it is.
I think you might have covered that one in a retro review by some chance. A little bit of shameless plug.
Was and it was a Patreon request. See, if you're on Patreon, you can request something. Double shameless plug. I remember that Tony requested it. That's his favorite fight. Yeah, I think I think it's a mix of all three, because at first I was like, oh, it's because of the first two, which is funny. We kind of complained a little bit about the star power of the last card of 2024. And then here we are in 2025, and it's like, hey, for some reason, the first card of the year is actually stacked. Part of me also goes, what if in their brain they're like, oh, this is our way of saying sorry for the 98 Apex cards we had last year. And it's like, but you have 99 Apex cards scheduled this year. Anyways, sorry, it's kind of the vibe I also kind of get from it.
Well, I think the apology falls apart when you see the card that's happening this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, they've been hyping up. It's really funny to me. They've been hyping up Thiago Moises a lot in media things and things like that. And I was like, oh, is he the co-main event? And I looked at it and I was like, he's not. He's on the prelims of the first card of the year. Odd. Definitely kind of funny. And a connection to our main event, because I'll never forget they made him ranked as soon as he fought Islam Makhachev. As soon as he found the fight, they ranked him.
Good way to get us back onto the tangent there. Before we actually talk about the card itself, though, I think we need to talk about the big elephant in the room, which is, unfortunately, we've all heard the news going on about the wildfires which are sweeping across Los Angeles. We do want to say, if there is anybody who watches the channel or has family over there, we hope that you stay safe, stay well, and hopefully nothing too severe happens to either yourself or your family. We do deeply send our best regards. I bring this up.
Please be safe.
I bring this up because the UFC are planning to hold this event at the Intuit Dome, which has just been launched. Ironically enough, you mentioned Hogan and Jimmy Hart. The first Raw of the Netflix era actually took place in that very building. Now, at the time we're recording this, The UFC have said they are still planning to hold the event at that arena. But, Joe, do you think the UFC are making the right call with this move? Do you think the event should be going ahead in LA?
I know the venue itself has said it has assured everyone as well that everything's okay. It should be okay. But I I don't know the like the trying to think of the wording here. The procedure for handling such a thing like this. You know, I'm used to tornadoes, not like wildfires isn't like something I've ever had. I've thankfully never had to experience. But I feel like with a wildfire, it's a little bit harder to kind of predict predict it. And I don't know if like what you have to do in place infrastructure wise to kind of prepare against it and protect everybody and protect the land itself from such a thing. So I wonder if having tons of people in the area is kind of a scary thing from the city's point of view. Like if that's like, oh, maybe we should as the city come down and say, you can't do this. Like this is a bad idea. But I also kind of wonder if in some way this is a good thing because it's like there's a lot. I work with a lot of people who are in California, and I work with a lot of people I support, at my job because I am in IT, are in California, and there's like a lot of like fear and like being like worried and scared a little bit and sad about the whole situation. And I wonder if they come out, they put on a great show, would boost morale. So I'm kind of torn on from my point of view, because I know I always think of like certain situations where, I know I probably won't tell the whole my example. I won't tell it here because I don't want to ramble too much. But oh, excuse me, had a burp. I apologize. Had to mute the mic. Uh, and but I know there's definitely power in something fun, uplifting a community. That's definitely a thing, and this could be something. But at the same time, I also worry for like the city's infrastructure having to compensate for all these people that are going to be at the venue itself as well. So I'm kind of worried about that situation. Is like it's kind of like a risk reward kind of thing here. Definitely not a Brett's rope jump. This is a full on top of a ladder, scary risk here.
Because I do know as well that based on what I'm seeing in front of me, the T-Mobile Arena is actually available for next Saturday. So if the UFC do, for any reason, decide to shift it, there's an obvious place for them to go to. But we also heard the rumours that Dana White seems to be at odds with the T-Mobile owners, which was basically a factor in them doing No Cheer UFC at the Sphere.
Man, what is that? Who's that guy not have beef with? I'm sure he hates us too on some level. I would hope he's the bigger man and be like in a situation where it's like for the safety of not just the fighters and the company. Like that's my big thing is like it's not just the fighters in the company, it's everyone in the city potentially if you're pulling resources from the city that can be used to help out like a wider area. I would hope can put aside your beef to help out here. But
Not gonna lie, I'd kind of like it if we were big enough that Dana would include us in some kind of diss video.
that'd be awesome if he called us a goofs. Like if he called us goofs, I would be like I would ask your permission and be like, can I take this to a full on like Loretta Hunt style beef?
To be fair, we've
buttons?
had people in the comments call us far worse than goofs.
Yeah, exactly. So we're used to it.
On that cheery note, though, we're going to be moving on to the prelims. You can see those on your screen right now. Now, we do want to bring up a little bit of breaking news regarding these prelims. I haven't been able to update the graphics between the time this goes out on air. But we did receive the news just a few hours ago that Johnny Walker has reportedly pulled out of his fight with Bogdan Guskov. So that was going to be the prelim headliner. A bit of a blow to the card, but as we sort of touched on earlier on in the show, there seems to be a lot of depth outside of that.
Yeah, these are good prelims. These are definitely the kind of prelims that I know I would be interested in just like starting from the beginning and watching for sure. Like there's some definitely good ones here. For some reason, you kept talking about how you're just excited for the Island Perez fight. I forgot why.
Me and Billy Gunn. I'll let you
Yeah,
let
you
that
and
out.
Billy Gunn.
In all seriousness, though, I actually do think that could be fun. I mean, Eileen's a bit of a meme fighter. She's built a little bit of a following for obvious reasons. But let's not forget, Karl is incredibly fun. I mean, women's bantamweight, it's not the best weight class in the world. But I do think Karl is one of the more sort of action-packed fighters in those lower reaches of the top 10. I mean, that fight with Aldana was fantastic.
Oh yeah, this fight's gonna be fun. I admittingly, as much as of a meme fight as it is, for me to bring it up, it's definitely gonna be a fun fight.
One of the things
that fight's fun.
One of the things I do want to bring up in regards to these prelims, though, is it's something that I sort of touched on at times in 2024, and we're seeing it again this time around. I think the UFC are becoming much more entertainment focused when it comes to card order. So even if you're a fighter who's quite highly ranked in your weight class, if you're not delivering on the entertainment front, they're going to bury you on the prelims. We talked about that with Makhachev at 304. Ultimately ended up with him getting axed by the promotion. Evloya versus Aljamain Sterling, which that fight had no business being on the 310 prelims. And also brings us on to our good friend Teep Kick the Double Leg. He's buried on the prelims as well.
My favorite meme on this card. He's if he does it against Spivak, then it's like we're back on track, boys. We're going back in.
The one thing that I'm hoping from that fight, though, and I think this is one of the reasons the UFC have done this fight as well. I think Spivak is one of the few heavyweights that's okay being on his back. Because we saw what he did with Tibura.
I think he can also like just stuff the takedown.
Well, we thought Curtis Blades was going to, though, didn't we? Well, he kind of did in the second round.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah, Curtis Blades didn't at the first round, and I think all of us except me groaned, and I went, "Oh my god, he can't keep getting away with this." I was having my Jesse Pinkman moment. Because I feel like Spivak, what he struggles with is dynamic striking. You know, like there are some if you're a dynamic striker, like a Cyril Gahn or the guy I always think of, obviously is the true best heavyweight in the planet. Not named Francis technically, but Tom Aspinall just lit him up on the feet, controlled him in the clinch, and then blasting him with that elbow.
I don't know why I thought you were going to say Walt Harris.
Oh yeah, Walt Harris pieced him up, didn't he? Yeah, I was a huge Walt Harris fan. Not just for his story. His story obviously was great, but not great, heartbreaking really. But his story helped really cement my place. But I really liked Walt Harris. Thought a fun, undersized, kick heavy heavyweight was something fun. So, but guys like that definitely can give him trouble. Jilton Almeida's only strike is the so I actually think Spivak can win here. If not, then insert Jesse Pinkman meme. Another fight I'm pumped for is I don't know why it's not on the ESPN Disney Plus one, but Grant Dawson, Carlos Diego Fajeda, that fight's awesome. Fight's great. You have Ricky Tercios, who is super funny because for a guy being all action, just pushing the pace, swinging from over here to hit a guy right here, he's just swinging over guys, missing a bunch of shots. and then grapple, like, aggressive on the ground. He somehow like is like kind of boring, but kind of fun. Like he's a like an anomaly for me in terms of entertainment. Um, but he's fighting in the prelims. So if you're into that, if you're not into that, there's that guy. And then of course the big name, Peyton Talbot, the guy everyone's probably tuning in to see, with one of the lamest. No offense to him, because I think he's very fun, and I actually like a little bit of him. But one of the douchiest tattoos I've ever seen in my entire life. The black circle on his chest and on his back. I thought it was like a weird birthmark at first, until I realized there's a matching one on his back, and I went, "What happened?"
Maybe he's hoping like
And
Wile E. Coyote tries to run through it.
yeah, yeah. I thought that was like the cartoon equivalent of like or maybe like a comic book thing where someone shoots Wolverine with like a shotgun, and there's that hole in his stomach and you can see clean through it or something like that. And I like the Looney Tunes thing, you're despicable.
Do you think that
Um,
Peyton is the real deal, or do you think this is another O'Malley situation where sort of like he's a bit of a Dana pet and they're trying to sort of artificially pump him up a bit?
there's like there's definitely like some truth to both of those, I think. Because let's not forget, as much as I dislike Sean O'Malley as the fighter, and all of that, he is good. Like Sean O'Malley, with like if he fought, people he should have fought, he would have been like top five for sure. Uh, the Aljo thing is kind of like, where do you stand on the Aljo fight kind of thing. Uh, I was recently reminded of the controversy of Tim Welch trying to sound like Merab's corner and Aljo's corner, and talking to them to try and throw them off, which I don't. That sounds dirty to me, and it is against the rules. But like, I know a lot of people don't think it is, so I don't know how I feel about it. Like, um, but I definitely can see some of that connection there with him. But he's, a lot of power, like a lot of power, and he's kind of slick on the feet. I definitely am curious to see more of him, and I think time will tell. Is this guy going to be like a Taporia, or who had some hype on him um, post Ryan Hall, or is this guy going to be Sean O'Malley, where it's like, we found Dennis Siever, you know, like Thomas Almeida, we signed him back. That's the more accurate one.
Lanky
Um,
grapplers with zero striking. I think I found Dana's type.
he's got a type. He's got a type. And if I remember right, no, this isn't him. I was trying to remember the name. I thought it was Honey Barcelos, but it was was it? Yeah, it was Howley and Paiva, that they were like, you beat Tyler Phillips. Guess what? You're ranked. Like after one win, you're ranked in fighting Sean O'Malley. And it's like after he lost, it's like, you're not ranked. You were never ranked.
We are starting, however, with a fighter who at one point was ranked in the middleweight top 10. Now he's unranked right now. It is Kevin Holland, and he is introducing for his second UFC appearance Rainier Davide. It's opening up the main card here in the middleweight division. So, Rainier Davide made his debut in November 2024. He beat Joel Merchard with a third round submission. Now, this was a guy who entered the UFC with a ton of hype. Obviously, being a two-division champion with one championship, which a lot of people do feel like one is up there alongside the PFL, KSW, Ryzen, in being that sort of top band of MMA weight classes outside the UFC. The biggest takeaway I had from that fight, though, is Chatri did a hell of a job hoodwinking a lot of people, because I thought very limited.
He is very limited. Very, very limited on the feet. Um, for me, when it came to like the upper weight classes of one, I was like, that's not, those aren't real. They're there and they have belts, but like those guys aren't top level. We're gonna feel like 155 kind of, definitely like the lower weight classes are legit. I mean, let's be honest. If Mighty Mouse didn't retire, if he didn't retire, just into this contract, went up to the UFC, he would be a title contender like out the gate, right? But it's just a fact for 135 and 125. I think he would have been. But so and he had a loss in one C, so it is what it is. Um, like I think they were legitimately very good down there as well up there with PFL. But of the upper weight classes, I wasn't buying it personally. Um,
Heavyweight champion Rug. That says it all.
yeah, yeah. Brandon Vera at 49 years old was I think a 2 or 3 division champion. There, as much as I enjoy their same day weigh-ins, right? Like because like Rainier de Ritter was like he was their middleweight champion at 205 pounds. He's really their middleweight. Like he's a middleweight, you know, um, in that sense. But on the feet, JM3 was putting it on him pretty good, and he didn't look like he had much. And he's taking on a guy who can't wrestle really, but is a good striker, has decent submission grappling, or solid, honestly, submission grappling, trained by Michael Jordan of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu himself, Travis Lutter, and fun reference if anyone doesn't know. Um, and I think this fight sounds fun. I think this is a good step up for Reiner de Ritter, and I think it's a really solid step up for him. I think JM3 is like right there underneath Kevin Holland in terms of the pecking order of the division. I know he's your boy, and I don't mean that derogatory. I like JM3 too.
Hey,
But
if you're a boy, you're not really supposed to be good.
yeah, he's he's like we've had boys and gals. Honestly, for both of us, we've just had gals. um, but at the same time, uh, what's it called? I feel like when it comes to the boys itself, JM3 might have gotten closer to graduating because I than than we want to admit, but still a boy for us.
I think this fight is. I usually do criticize the UFC a lot when it comes to the matchmaking, especially when it comes to the title fight. I actually think this is really good matchmaking because with Derrida, you've got a guy who, in my opinion, has the size advantage over Holland. I think
Yeah.
Kevin Holland, in my opinion, Kevin Holland does his best work as a welterweight. So in this case, he's fighting an extra 15 pounds against a guy who already is massive for this weight class. Holland's going to have a massive striking advantage. If it stays on the feet, he's going to piece up Davida. But we've seen Kevin Holland struggle against guys who are able to take him down and keep him there. You look at Marvin Vettori, you look at Derek Brunson, and we could very easily get another situation like that. So I think it's interesting to see who gets the fight into the area that they want to the most.
It's basically going to be fight I like to coin, and I'm hoping this catches on. It won't because it's not very good. But the fight I like to think of as two signs of Chael Sonnen. One of them is saying, "I can't let you get close," and the other one is double legging you in flip flops. So, um,
Doesn't roll off the tongue
and,
as well as Holly Holming.
no, Holly Holming is the best I've ever done. I did that early too. I said that like really early on in my run, and it's caught on great. And seeing that in the comments is fantastic.
Was there anything about Davida's performance against GM3 that stood out for you? In terms of like things he likes doing, he dislikes, any sort of quirks he seems to go to?
I mean, on a very like non-technical level, he doesn't like standing up. He likes being on the ground. I mean, that much was very, very sure. Um, his 6 submissions are very slick. I've watched him in one a couple times, and he hits some like really for a bigger dude. He hits some like pretty slick submissions. I feel like the bigger you get in grappling, especially in like jujitsu type environments, like the less cool stuff you see. Like you're still seeing cool stuff. Like let's be honest, like Gabriel Gonzaga, Verdum, if you watch them grapple, they're still doing like really cool stuff, for sure. But
Big
like,
Nog.
yeah, a big nog. Oh my gosh, that's some of the coolest moments in MMA. Um, when it comes to the grappling, Frank Mir as well. If we're going to talk about one, you got to talk about the other. I feel like, um, and but like if you like look at like lower weight classes, like look at like what like stuff like Craig Jones does, or poster second, the number two poster child for steroids, Gordon Ryan. Um, just like he does some crazy stuff. Ryan Hall had some crazy stuff. Like lower level, like, or not lower level, lower weight class guys always have like the crazier bag of tools in it, and it's really cool seeing a guy who is bigger have. I'm not saying the same level of quality grappling like those guys. Ignore my phone. I need to turn it on vibrate. Um,
Were you thrown off?
and
Were you thrown off by one of the things I noticed from watching the GM3 fight, and I have seen this in some of his other fights as well, is we do have some slick submission skills from Derrida on the ground, but sometimes he has a tendency to give up position in his bid to try and get the subs. We saw that a few times against GM3, where he would try
yeah,
and go
he's
for a
definitely a
sub.
killer be killed.
Yeah,
Definitely a killer be killed guy.
yeah.
GM3 took advantage of that. You know, feel kind of bad for honestly for Reiner the Ritter, because like he had a solid performance in a decent fight, and then it's like, oh wow, he's might be the big talking point because he talked about how bad ONE FC was. Oh, is that Carlos Pratis blasting the O'Macey? Never mind. Like we all had the Andy from Toy Story 2 moment,
I don't
like
want to play with you
holding up Reiner the
anymore.
Ritter. you know. Um, how much we reference that meme on this channel, by the way, is so funny to me. Like it's so real. Like it happens all the time. But it's just, Forrest Griffin said it best. This sport is a "What have you done for me lately?" sport. Um, and
And what Kevin Holland's
I
done lately is lose his most recent fight to Roman Dolite, UFC 307. And it kind of sums up the sort of the Kevin Holland enigma when it comes to being in the UFC, where he will string together 2 or 3 wins, then hit a roadblock, arguably move up to another weight class, do the same thing, move back down, move back up. It's with Kevin Holland, have we found a guy who knows what his ceiling is and is just cashing in the paychecks? Like if he did pick and choose his fights a bit more, commit to one weight class, do you think we maybe could be seeing him entering the top 10 of like welterweight? Because, I mean, he fought JDM, gave him a
think
very
so.
close fight.
Yeah, he had JDM in some trouble at times. That I remember picking him to beat MVP, and MVP just embarrassed him. It was really rough seeing that. Him and Wonder Boy was a very good fight. Him and Shemaev wasn't,
That doesn't count,
but
though.
yeah, Shemaev was like 500 pounds, I think, in that fight. He was like 180 pounds, I think. Uh, he's like, oh, doctor said I couldn't make weight. Stop cutting weight. I swear. What doctor? Smashing. I'm down here to smash.
And I love just
One
Rogan,
of my
and I love
favorite
Rogan
post-fight
insisting to
meltdowns.
him, you can't do that if you don't make weight.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite post-fight interview meltdowns ever. Because Rogan is not letting this go, and Shemaev is like clearly trying to like hype up the crowd that's booing him for missing weight and nearly or basically ruining an event that wasn't very good to begin with, and just I smashed. No, everyone. I don't care what weight. Like I know you have to care what weight. You have to care. Like, line like looking around for help. It's super funny. Um, yeah, I mean, I feel like we've seen a ceiling because like he blasted Dirty Cowboy, beat Tim Means, and it was like okay, cool. Like we're gonna slowly build him back up. Welterweight. Sorry, you got to fight Shemaev. Sorry, you got to fight Wonder Boy. It's like okay, beat my boy Fonzie, who fights tonight. Beat Michael Chiesa, which is pretty slick. Gave JDM a tough fight, and then it's like, all right, you're fighting MVP.
But I mean, you go back further in his
Okay.
career, there's wins over Buckley, Fluffy Hernandez, Jeff Neal. Like, he is
Yeah,
capable of beating some of these top guys when he's focused.
JM3, in a close fight. Always forget about that one because it happened. I always feel like he made his debut. I always feel like it's like Thiago Santos and then 2020, like right after. And it's not. He fought like a couple more times in between, like in those moments. Um, but like Fluffy Hernandez is a huge win. Joaquin Buckley is a win that's aged fairly well. Uh, Probably one of the most spectacular KOs ever against Jacare, which I love that KO. I love Jacare. One of my all-time favorite like middleweights ever is Jacare Souza, and uh, it was hard to see him win that way, but at the same time, it's also like I gotta give credit to the guy, knocking a dude off his feet, speaks to my soul, my boss root and soul. um, yeah, it's that one's a crazy one for sure. But then it's like here comes Derek Brunson wrestling him. Here comes Marvin Vittori wrestling him. I don't know. I feel like we at welterweight, I feel like there was still some gas in the tank to see where he was going, but at the same time, he likes to make money in a sport that doesn't pay very well. So I don't know. It's kind of awkward for him.
So if Kevin Holland's going to keep this standing and sort of exploit the weaknesses in Derrida's game, what can he do technically to avoid that? Because you could argue good distance management's always been a big thing. My big concern when it comes to Kevin Holland, and we saw this many times when he did fight these grapplers, is he's one of the few middleweights, I think, who is willing to sort of like step forward to land the big power punches. But you do that, you're throwing yourself off balance, and you're throwing yourself into position to get taken down. And we saw that several times against Brunson, we saw that several times against Vittori, and I just kind of feel that Kevin Holland, he is who he is now. And I don't think that's anything he's going to sort of wrinkle out of his game. It's going to be there, and I think everybody's going to try and exploit it.
Yeah, I think that's how you beat him. He's going to throw himself out, and even then, his grappling isn't the absolute like, or not his grappling, but his wrestling isn't the best per se. Um, it's definitely like definitely hard, you know. Uh, I I think he's going to throw himself out of position here and probably get taken down at least once in this fight. But I'm hoping, a guy like Reiner de Ritter who struggles on the feet can get confused. I do like Kevin Holland a lot. As a fan, I'm rooting for him. Um, but I hope it's the distance management. I hope he's patient because, like, if you look at like the shots he knocks guys out with, they're the shots he's not looking to like land the big shot. Like it's always like little shot. Like I always think of the Joaquin Buckley shot that knocks him out. It's just a 1-2, puts him down. And it's just a counter right hand. And it has a loud crack to it. Buckley is clearly out. Like the way he falls is nuts. That's one of the better KOs from that era, that 2020 era. And it's a really good one.
What is your money going to be with this one, Joe?
I think Kevin Holland can survive at least one attempt on the ground, one go on the ground, and I think I could see him landing enough shots that it's going to kind of neutralize. Like getting punched is tiring. Getting punched is very tiring, and I think I think he can kind of wear out Reiner de Ritter, who's the bigger guy, who might have some cardio issues coming into this since he has to actually cut weight over here. Like in ONE FC, you don't really cut that much weight really, and it's a little more unhealthy here really. But I think Kevin Holland can abuse the cardio issue by just landing more shots, tiring him out, wearing him out, and then getting the finish. But I think he'll win a decision personally.
I'm going to play the percentages and go with de Ritter. I know that's a big ask, given that there is these big issues regarding his striking defense. I don't think Kevin Holland has that sort of big one-shot power to just stop de Ritter. I think if Holland is going to win, it is going to be an accumulation of strikes. But I think the
Mhm.
longer that fight goes on, I still think that David is going to have an opportunity to get this to the mat. And I just have a lot of concerns that if he gets Holland down, Holland's not going to be able to get back up.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping for he throws himself out of position and Holland gets a reversal.
I do,
But
yeah.
that is a thing, but I don't think that will happen. I feel like that's at that point you're hoping for your opponent to make a mistake in a life-threatening situation, and I don't think that's ever a good call.
I do want to say to anybody who is watching right now, you might be wondering about the lighting on my end, because it is, we're talking nearly 12 o'clock over here in the northeast of England. We did plan to record this on the Saturday morning, but somebody on the right hand side of my screen there, if I managed to get some, there we go, I managed to get it there. Somebody over there slept through 6 different alarms. So we're managing to do this at the last possible moment because unfortunately there's no chance I can record this on the Sunday.
I thought I threw the I thought I threw this off. This is my sleep mask I used to wake me up because it has headphones in it or has earphones in it that link to my phone. And I thought I must have thrown it off in my sleep. No, I so the first thing I did when I woke up was message you. I was like, what happened? You know, I saw the sun out and I went, something's wrong. And I look and it had fallen off my head. And like, I guess it just didn't have it on tight enough, or maybe not really had it on. Maybe I think I might have fallen asleep with it like right here instead of on my head or something. And it had fallen off behind my bed.
It's you listen.
So I was like, where is it?
It's you listening to all of Marvin Monroe's vocabulary lessons, Joe.
I was listening to my favorite philosopher and linguist of all time, Tito Ortiz. You know, 6 days a week I train 9 days a week. 9 days a week I train 4 days a week, and on that fifth day of the week I train 42 days.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised you didn't say you were listening to Jamal Hill. He's been making a lot of noise recently, and that's who we're going to be talking about right now because Jamal Hill is going to be taking on Yuri Prochazka in a light heavyweight bout. Before we actually get into the X's and O's of this fight itself, let's just talk about Jamal Hill and this sort of heel turn that he's made over the past few months because you go on the internet, you go on social media, this guy is almost devil spawn to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I'm going to put myself in the minority here. I'm kind of digging the heel role because I don't know about you. I've always felt like Jamal Hill was somebody who I don't think the fans ever truly respected. I think maybe that was because he'd be the fan favourite in Glover. Maybe that was because he kind of got the belt in convoluted fashion because there was the stuff with Jan and Ankalaev the month before. But I don't think the fan
Mhm.
base has ever truly loved him. And obviously when they started memeing him about the Pereira fight, he wasn't going to earn any favours because we know what that fan base is like. So I think he's kind of thought, you know what, nobody likes me anyway. I'm going to lean into the heel role a bit. And it's kind of worked because this fight has now become one of the most intriguing ones on this card and one of the sort of must watch, largely because there's people out there who want to see Jamal lose.
I think he's. I think that's definitely a good point.
I mean, I don't,
'Cause
I don't think it's something that he's just sort of contrived for the sake of sort of building an audience for himself. I think it's him exaggerating a real part of the personality because I think he is delusionally confident. I think you need to be in this kind of sport, and that's what he's
Mhm.
turned into a shtick. He's amplified the real him to 11.
Yeah, that's a good point because I struggle to think of like very many champions who have been like, oh, I'm just here. I'm just happy to be here. That had like good long runs. You know, like Randy Couture is like the only one I could think of, and even he was like, ah, I'm gonna go in there. I'm gonna win, but it's gonna be tough. You know, um, and you know, yeah, even guys who seem mild mannered, it's like here's Matt Hughes talking about Frank Trick sucks. GSP, he sucks. I'm gonna beat him too. You know, kind of in this not that harsh language, but yeah, he was basically saying that. So I think there's definitely some truth there to the Jamal Hill kind of heel turn. I kind of think of him talking trash, uh, coming up in like UFC 300. I think he was like, I don't. I think like what really soured a lot of people was him going, "No, I'm going to beat him on the feet," and we all had the moment of like Naked Gun. You know, we all were kind of doing that, and he just gets absolutely walloped and destroyed on the feet. He gets walked down. Uh, we all have the meme thing of like it hits him low and then left hook, like it's over. Um, and then he wakes up, starts talking even more trash, and I can definitely understand it rubbing people the wrong way because it rubs me the wrong way personally. That could be good heel work. It could be he's still waking up. I think there's a lot of things going on, and now you're going after another fan favorite in Jiri, saying Jiri sucks and all this stuff. Talking smack to Jiri, basically stopping Jiri from going to middleweight, and then go and being like, no, you're staying a light heavyweight to fight me, which is definitely interesting. This fight I think is interesting too because it's kind of hard to gauge what's going to happen. I think.
I'm in the same boat
Um,
as well because, like, I think from Jamal's perspective, you've got a guy that's sort of, as I mentioned before, sort of got artificially pushed to the front of the weight class. I mean, yes, he
yeah.
beat Glover, who I think was number 2 at the time, but I think the Yuri fight took a lot out of Glover. I think that was a really that was a lesser version of Glover that Jamal Hill beat, in my opinion. And then obviously he gets injured, and then you get the Pereira fight, which ends a bit too quickly to really gauge how good Jamal is after the injury. And in the case of Yuri, you've got another guy who he blew out his shoulder after the Glover fight. So we don't know if he's back to 100%, whether he's still the same fighter that he was when he fought Dom Reyes and Volkan. So I think there's a lot of intangibles that are unknown, which also add to the intrigue for me.
I mean, I think what's super interesting is Jamala Hill might potentially have the pure power advantage. It's at least close. I think Jamal Hill is probably a little bit cleaner. He gets hit much less than Jiri, but Yuri is much more dynamic and much more versatile on the feet, but much more hittable. So it's kind of like a flashy but very hittable, not the most fight IQ. I'm getting destroyed by low kicks. Must be black shamanic magic.
It's kind of like a minigun versus a shotgun. I think that's the best way to look at it.
Yeah, fair. Very fair.
Yeah. I hope that doesn't get us like demonetized for mentioning weapons.
I don't understand that idea too. It's like you can't even mention guns or or you're gonna take your money away.
Yeah. So we need a few more
Certain
subscribers
things like
before
that.
we can get to that stage, thankfully.
True, true. Yeah, we're close to monetization, but not quite there.
Yeah. So we're going to talk about Yuri in a little bit more detail here. So a 35-1 record here. So there was a draw back when he was in Ryzen, I think. So some of the notable wins include Rakic, Glover Teixeira, Dom Reyes, Volkan Oezdemir, Vadim Nemkov when he fought back in Ryzen. And looking at this fight here, I bring this up simply because the difference in time of the primes between these two fighters. He fought and beat Kazuyuki Fujita.
Hilarious. That one's a wild one. Like he beat him in 2016.
Which is about like 15 years after Fujita's prime. Like I remember when this guy was beating
Yeah.
Mark Kerr.
Yeah, I remember when he was fighting Fedor and running Fedor. Like he was the first one to ever like put like anything on Fedor, you know? Um, you know, old Ironhead they called him because he was like impossible to knock out. Like for like the longest time. Like you could TKO him, but he was gonna be conscious and going, man, I got hit too many times. Like after the fight, you're like, what happened? You know? Um,
So a lot of people try and make Yuri out to be this kind of reckless, wild brawler. I've heard some people compare him to sort of a light heavyweight Tony Ferguson. Is there method to the madness?
it's a good one. I like that Tony Ferguson one. I've heard Vanderlei Silva, but I think he's a little more cleaner than that, I'll be honest. Um, Tony Ferguson is a very good one. There is a method to his madness. He's also like Tony Ferguson, very athletic and can move himself out of harm's way if he needs to. Um, he also, um, I think he's definitely got a lot of power, and he knows that if he at least lands it, he's gonna it's gonna do some damage. And I mean, if you look at his finishing rate, he has two decisions in his entire 36 fight career. That is an absurd amount. And he himself has 26 KOs out of 30 wins. That is an absurd finishing rate. Like CB Dalloway, King Mo, Brandon Halsey was somebody for a little bit. Um, like just KO, 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 KO. It's insane. All of his wins in the UFC, knockout. You know, um, and all of his losses in the UFC, knockout. Um, I mean, weird that they called a Pajeda one the head kick at least a TKO. Pretty sure he was out. Pretty sure he was out unconscious from that one. Um, but yeah, this guy. He feels almost like a glass cannon, which is fans love when they're winning. When they lose, it's like, oh, my heart is so broken because I know that's how I feel. He is. There is definitely a method to the madness because it has got him a lot of success. One of the best KOs of all time for me is his Dominic Reyes one. Um, the way he falls, the way he like that fight. By the way, everyone talks about that KO, right? And it's because it's such a good KO, you forget how amazing the fight is. You know, that's a situation to me where, unlike, even though I think this fight's great too, we talked about this for like the end of year recap show. Like the Justin Gaethje Max Holloway fight, the KO might elevate that fight. I feel like the KO of the Dominic Reyes fight kind of hurts that fight because no one talks about how great that fight is because everyone wants to talk about the KO. And that's kind of how I feel a little bit with that one. But that fight's amazing as well. The Glover fight's amazing. The Glover fight I tell my friends who aren't like we're anime fans but aren't fight fans. I go, you should watch this fight. It's essentially like one person hurts the other one and nearly gets the finish. They survive. The power of friendship boosts them up to another level, and they make a comeback. Then the power of friendship helps the other one out, and it's just like them constantly nearly killing each other for about 24 minutes. It's until the finish happens.
I brought up
It is.
I brought up the method to the
Go ahead.
madness analogy as well because I was reading one of the articles. I think it might have been Jack Slack or someone like that, and they brought up some of like Yuri's big strengths and weaknesses, and they said that part of the reason that he's so erratic and wild. I don't know if you feel the same way, Joe, but if you have a lot of things going on at the same time in any walk of life, it's physically exhausting and it's mentally exhausting. So if you have a guy who's jumping around in front of you and he's trying to throw spinning back fists and all kinds of weird angles, you're going to be thinking, what on earth's going on here? And we can see, if you watch a lot of Yuri's fights, his opponents are exhausted by the time he finishes them. Like Dom Reyes was gassed because he had so much going on, thinking and physically, with Yuri in front of him. Even Glover, who we know can be quite level-headed, he was making mistakes by the end of that fifth round.
It's a great point, honestly, because it's really if you go into a fight with like a lot of people kind of we've talked about this a couple of times. A lot of people go in the fight Alex Pajeda and they're like, I gotta watch out for that left hook. They get eaten up by the low kicks, and it's like, okay, I gotta watch out for the low kicks and the left hook, and then here comes like in the case of you know body shots and stuff like that as well. And also, but then like on the flip side, like so like being too tense up can wear you out. You have to be a little looser. But then if you're too loose, here comes 80 different things coming at you, flying by, Yuri. I was thinking of the Volkan Ozdemir fight where he goes for the flying knee, it misses, and Ozdemir is just like, "What? Would get away from me? Please stop!" And then here comes bang, bang, and it's over. This guy's throwing flying knees and elbows and spinning back fists, and you kind of freeze up because it's like, what is he going to do next? Like, I got to figure this out. And then the classic 1-2 that every fighter throws. The one thing that every fighter throws, he knocks you out with. Um, and it's gotta wear on. Yeah, I mean, because Tony Ferguson, how many times has he fought guys and they just go like in his prime and his big run, they just go like I just couldn't figure out what was going to happen next, and I'm worn out because he was constantly doing something weird or insane. And as fans, we loved him for it. You know, in his prime, Tony Ferguson, at the risk of sounding like a broken record, Tony Ferguson in his prime was just, it felt like unbeatable. Just such an aura on him, you know.
We've got to
But
cover Tony as a retro review topic at some point.
oh man, we've covered arguably two of his best fights, I think already, and like we got to cover the Pettis fight in the first ever retro review, which is might be his best fight. That fight is just unbelievable. We have a we have a giant poster in the living room of Tony smiling after sucking the blood. Just like that. That's one of my favorite moments and images of one of my favorite cards of all time. Overall, the main event's kind of special for me. Anyways,
So, money where your mouth is. Who's winning this one?
I'm so terrified picking this. My brain says Jamala Hill catches Jiri, who is just a little too hittable. But my heart, and I'm gonna go with my heart here, says Jiri wears down Jamala Hill.
I'm in that. I'm leaning the same way. I think this is a real 50-50 fight because
Yeah.
Jamal Hill, as a much more conventional striker, is more than capable of finishing a guy who... I do think the injury took a little bit out of Yuri. I don't think he's the same guy that he was before after the Glover fight. So I think that is maybe a concern. But we mentioned before, you got a lot of things going on in front of you. I think you've got to be quite level-headed. You've got to be quite mature to deal with that. I don't think Jamal Hill is, and I can see a situation where Jamal Hill gets flummoxed, throws himself into a mistake, and Yuri's able to capitalise.
Yeah. I think that's kind of the vibe I also get as well. I'm kind of thinking the same thing, but maybe it's my bias. I love Yuri. I'm not a Jamal Hill fan at all. I'm really hoping Yuri puts it on him. And it's funny too, is I think Jamal Hill doesn't like anyone talking negatively about him. If he saw this, he would be mad.
Yeah.
He'd be mad at us. And I would tell him where you live, but not where I live.
Well, no one's getting anywhere near where I live because we're under a few inches of snow right now.
Yeah, so are we. We're under 2 or 3. It keeps freezing over. Well, it's warm right now. It's like 43. Well, not warm. It's still freezing, but 43 degrees technically here. So above the freezing temperature, but Fahrenheit, of course. And then, but it keeps going below freezing at night, so it keeps icing over. So it's like, oh,
Snow,
it's even worse at night.
Snow in Oklahoma and the wildfires. It's like day after tomorrow, isn't it?
No, we get snow. It's funny. Everybody always assumes we don't get snow. We get snow like once a year, for sure. Like every year we get like snow like once or twice a year. We've even had snow in February, so and like March and stuff. So it's definitely odd. Oklahoma feels like essentially if I have a bag of random weather effects, and once a day I just go, this is what you got today, and it's like, whoa. I've had massive storm, or I've had storms galore. I've had ice, snow, tornadoes, hurricanes have affected us in weird ways because of the wind and and what it sends down. So that's kind of funny. We've had earthquakes. We have had 115-degree weather. I mean, we're just kind of everything.
This could very well be a stormy fight as well. We are going down to the lightweight division, and Beneil Dariush is back in action for the first time since December 2023, and he's going to be taking on one of the... Would you call him a fan favourite right now? It is Renato Moicano on the midst of a 4-fight winning streak, fresh off demolishing, and I think I have to use that word, Benoit Saint-Denis, and halting that hype train. So, what's your appetite to see this fight, in your opinion? Because with Benny, you had a guy who was on a big winning streak, in my opinion, based on merit, should have got the title shot against Makhachev. Unfortunately, the UFC, quite knowingly in my opinion, booked him against Charles Oliveira in the real main event of UFC 289. And then what did they do next? They booked him against Arman Tsarukyan, and we all saw what happened in that fight. So Benny holding two recent losses against two guys right at the top of this weight class. And I think a lot of people, because of that, are maybe writing off Benny as yesterday's news.
Yeah, I mean, because I think a lot of people forget though that Charles is the man, Sarukian is the man, and Benny should have already had the title fight. You know, Benny's always had a problem with getting hit and getting like. I'm not saying he's chinny, but you can definitely put him out. You know, like of his 6 losses, 5 are by knockout. I know a lot of people would say that means he has a bad chin. I think that just means he's a little hittable. I mean, because Charles hits like a truck, and Sarukian is deceptively good on the feet. And well, we'll talk about him later, of course, but very fast as well.
Do you think it's
and just kind of blitzed him.
Do you think it's the optics of Benny that maybe make people downplay him? Because you look at him compared to other fighters in lightweight, he's not the most physically imposing guy. He's got a few grey hairs, and I think people just see him as sort of like this old, washed dad bod.
Yeah, he really does have that. He definitely has it's like Kenny Florian might probably ran into that problem too back in the day, where people were like, "You're a high level fighter," you know, and Kenny Florian looks like the guy who in the in Not Another Teen movies living in a locker getting stuffed in it, you know, like and um you know what I mean? Like, he just looks like that. But he was, he was the man. And here's Benny, who is just had. I really struggle to think of a bad fight with Benny. I mean, I'm sure the Tony Ferguson one's kind of it's bad, but it's mostly like sad.
Yeah.
Really, that there's a difference. The Mateusz Gamrot fight is amazing.
I love that fight.
The fight is so good. What fight needed for the fight of the night? Was it Jan O'Malley? Like, I don't know. That fight is so good. It was Jan O'Malley, which I think the decision ruins that fight personally. But he has a lot of power in his hands. Little sloppy on the feet, like in terms of his punches and stuff like that. His striking isn't the prettiest, but he hits so hard you almost don't care. I still love the story of his spinning Belfast win over Scott Holtzman. I guess in the UFC game they gave him his spinning back fist, and it was really good. Like, his friend's son told him, like, yeah, like, you have a really good spinning back fist in the game. I use it all the time. And he's like, I don't think I've ever thrown one in a fight. I'm gonna throw one in my next fight and see what happens. And he got a knocked, which is amazing. The Drucker close finishing sequence is unbelievable. One of the best moments ever.
Unfortunately, it inspired the meme because they had the camera on the commentators, and that's the one where DC ends up like leaning into Joe because he's just that taken away by it. And I kind of feel like that one went so viral that Anik Rogan and DC, they started deliberately hamming up their reactions to try and go viral.
That's fair. I like that meme a lot, personally.
I mean, I like the meme,
like it
but it was like the first, and then the rest is sort of like pale imitations.
Yeah, that's very fair.
It's kind of like
my favorite.
It's kind of like when Tommy Wiseau made The Room, and then everything he made afterwards is just him trying to recreate something that was natural.
Very fair. The Room is a classic movie, in fairness. I'm drunk. I'm in love with you. But I will say, I think the best use of that meme is what's it called? The best use of that meme is still probably Tony Soprano and Bobby Bacala fighting in the fighting at the lake house, and then like they're squaring off, and then everyone freaking out. Like, that's the best use I've seen of that meme. Every time I think of that meme, I go, I always think of this. And sucker punch is a sucker punch as he's beaten, bloody, swollen up the next day. But yeah, it has to be the look because he's so. I love who doesn't love Neal Dariush? One of the few genuinely really nice guys. It seems like, I mean, we don't know him, we just see the camera, but it seems like one of the most genuinely nice guys in the sport ever. Really hard to not root for the guy. He was passed up over and over for title fights, and had a very fun matchup with Makhachev at one point. I would love to see him get back on it, but man, does he have a surprisingly older test than I always forget. I always feel like Moicano is like 31, but he's 35. But a guy who is on a hot streak right now.
He certainly is, because we look at some of the notable wins over his career so far. So you got Benoit Saint-Denis, Jalen Turner, Drew Dober, Brad Vidal, and then you got Alexander Fernandez. And if you go back down to featherweight, because a lot of people forget, Renato Moicano isn't this sort of chip off the old block, sort of fresh face to the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this guy was ranked in the top 5 at featherweight. He fought Jose Aldo in a title eliminator. Because he also has wins over Cub Swanson, Calvin Kattar, and Jeremy Stevens.
Yeah. He fought Aldo, and he was looking at his scariest because he mostly beat Calvin Kattar on the feet, which is even crazy.
It's a really good performance. Like, if you want a good demonstration of low kicks just completely neutralizing an opponent, that's the fight to watch.
Oh, yeah. And then everyone was like really scared of this guy who's a nightmare on the feet, getting better on the feet and a nightmare on the ground. Everyone was worried about this guy. And here comes Aldo turning back the clock. Frank, greatest fighter ever, just coming back and just blasts him. And then Korean Zombie catches him and beats him. And then it's like, okay, the shine's kind of off of him. And here he is at lightweight. And one of my favorite lightweight debuts ever, submits Hadjovic, I believe his name was, and gets mad because he beats him in 45 seconds. So he's like heated. He's like, oh, I wanted to fight more. I'm not mad at you. I'm just mad in general. I wanted to fight more. And Hadjovic looks at him and goes, you shouldn't have tapped me out so fast.
And you know the stat about that finish as well? A little bit of trivia. Oh, yeah. It was the first lockdown finish.
Oh, that's amazing. That's very cool. Yeah, that's a really cool, fun trivia.
Because they had that card in, I think it was Brasilia. I think it was Sao Paulo or Brasilia. And obviously they did it behind closed doors because of lockdown. And every fight before then went to a decision. Like, even like...
Except for the main event.
Like Johnny Walker versus Nikita Krylov, which everyone said there's no way this is going to go the distance. That went the distance.
Yeah. And the main event was also the infamous Kevin Lee tries to pull a Brazilian tap in Brazil. The capital of Brazil. Doesn't work. They know better. And then I randomly remembered this. He fought Fazeev, who I miss. Came back to us when you're healthy, 100%. I miss you so. I miss him so much at 155. Gosh, he was so good. They had the fight with RDA, which was don't think it should have gone 5 rounds. I think they should have stopped it beforehand, but is what it is. And credit to him for sure for gutting it out, toughing it out. And it felt like all the hype was gone, and then he started making this run. And I think you've said you're not a fan. You've never really got into the show. One of my favorite shows of all time is a show called Always Sunny in Philadelphia. And there's a moment in the show where these two brothers, I'm not going to go into details about them, but they're called the McPoyle brothers. And one is like about to fall over off the side of a building. And the other brother goes, I have you. I won't let you go. I won't ever let you go. I'm going to get you back up. And here comes Danny DeVito with a 2x4 going, no, you don't. And starts pushing the other brother off his arm. And I always think of that with that UFC 300 because Jalen Turner clobbers Moicano. And it's like, I've seen the people make that meme of Jalen Turner's post-fight bonus. I have you. I won't ever let you go. Also Jalen Turner. No, I don't. and because he kind of threw that fight a little bit. Um, Moicano was very much out of it and very, very hurt, and he wanted the walk off Mark Hunt style. What happens? Here comes a big comeback from Moicano, gets the fight to the mat, and just clobbers him on the ground.
Didn't
Um,
Turner say that he was a little bit spooked because he just had the Bobby Green fight before then, which was like a really late stoppage?
you know what? Actually, that's a good point. That would make a lot of sense to me because that's a hard to watch stoppage, and he probably unfairly caught some flack for that. When I feel like in the moment, it's really hard to blame the fighter personally. I think you blame the ref himself.
So what would you say are Moicano's biggest strengths then?
I mean, obviously, you look at his career and you go, oh, like he only has two finishes in there in the last two fights. Okay, so he probably isn't a threat on the feet. It's like, no, he can piece you up on the feet. He's not gonna. Maybe he may not knock you out clean on the feet, but he can beat you on the feet, for sure. He's also got. He's pretty durable despite having three knockout losses. Like he's pretty durable for sure. Um, he can on the ground though, he's very good. And lately, he's been just foregoing attempting submissions and has just been dropping elbows and punches like it's nothing. And um, it's very funny because he is kind of in terms of like a skill set. You go, that's a guy that they would give Paddy Pimblett, and he's been wanting it. And then you see the finishes he has, and they go, they're not going to give him Paddy Pimblett.
I know who they're giving
Uh,
Paddy Pimblett.
who do you think they are going to?
Chandler.
Oh, huh. Okay with that.
Because I
Because
think
I think Chandler could
because
still put him
I
out.
think Michael Chandler is highly ranked enough and still has enough goodwill with the
Name.
fans, bit of a name as well. And I think this version of Michael Chandler now, who is, in my opinion, past his prime, it is winnable for Paddy.
Yeah, that's fair. It's winnable for Patty. Patty gets hit a lot. Chandler still has that. Oh, that's gonna be a fun one to talk about when we get there. I hope it happens now.
Um,
Um,
like if this fight was happening, let's say Neal had had say a 4 month, 5 month layoff after his last fight,
mhm.
I would be putting all my money on Benny to win this one because I think Benny's big weakness has always been against the big power punchers or the guys who are willing to catch him early. And even though I think Moicano has made big strides in his striking, he's not like a one-shot knockout artist. So I don't
No,
think that big threat that's hurt Benny in his past few fights is going to be there.
is there?
But
Yeah,
you're looking at a guy that's had a 14-month layoff against a guy who's high on confidence. It does make me a little bit nervous, especially when we know that Benny is a bit of a slow starter as well.
yeah. Infamously bad slow starter.
So once
You
again,
know.
it's another pickup.
Uh, yeah, it's another pick, especially because like you look at like Benny's first loss in his career was Ramsey Nijum. You know, who it was not known for his striking prowess. Um, so he can. I mean, he's obviously gotten a lot better at this, but he can get caught. He can get hurt. Still, like that's just something that he's always gonna have in his career. Like he's hittable. But man, I feel like there's something here about the power difference between Dariush. Like I think the 14-month layoff is either going to be a good thing or it's going to be an awful thing, and where that's like the big question for me is the 14-month layoff. Because if it's a bad thing, then here's Moicano on a ton of momentum, ton of confidence. Like this could be him pushing into that, upper echelon, that top 10, and really making a solid run. Or this is, or that 14-month was a good thing, and Benny comes in refreshed. Maybe they gave him another move he doesn't throw again in the UFC games, and he was like, you know what? They say I'm pretty good at this. I'm going to try throwing it. um, and I mean, I think we're going to see from that. I think there's certain things. I mean, because that the power of Benny can definitely put out like on a here.
I wonder what kind of moves Merab Dvalishvili might have on UFC 5 because he is in action in our core main event. He is making the first defense of his UFC bantamweight title, but if he wants to retain his belt, he's going to have to go through the 18-0 Umar Nurmagomedov. So, Merab is coming into this fight 5 months removed from him winning the title against Sean O'Malley in what was officially, Joe, the highest grossing UFC pay-per-view main event of all time. And yet here he is in the core main event, which just shows how meaningless that stat is.
Yeah, just I feel like if Sean O'Malley would have won, they'd been like, well, see, it's very funny. I still stand by this. Sean O'Malley is not a star. That card did very, very well. You know why? Because it was
the Sphere
marketed as, it was marketed as we're at the Sphere, and it's Noche UFC. So if you're Mexican, you're legally obligated to buy it. And I went, I get a lot of crap for talking about how I'm Mexican on the channel all the time. So I'm going to buy it. I still love that recent comment that you told me about. Like, I talk about being Mexican a lot. It's like, that's because I don't look like it.
Although you
have to remind people.
Although you ended up ruining that card for me because I woke up, because obviously, because of the time difference, I don't stay up to watch the cards live. I tape them and watch first thing in the morning. And so I woke up the day after Noche UFC and I saw a comment from Joe saying, the card was brilliant until John Fitch showed up. And because I know you would have been happy if Merab had just fitched Sean O'Malley, I knew it wasn't the main event you were talking about, so I knew Chev won.
I remember thinking after I said that, I hope I didn't ruin it. Oops. I was like, what's funny is I actually got a lot of crap by one of our regulars. And me and him have gone back and forth about how I don't like Chev, and he's a huge Chev fan. And I went, man, I'm just gonna let you have it, but I can't argue with you here on this because we're just not ever gonna agree on it. I think that fight was really boring. I think Chev was super boring, but I know you're gonna disagree, and we're cool, buddy. Like, man, you got me. It's one of my favorite stories of last year. I feel so bad about it, but it's the way you tell that story is so funny to me.
I brought up the 5-month layoff because usually they say the turnaround for fighters is about sort of 6 months, 7 months before they make the next defense. With Whaley, it's sort of like 18 months or something like that. But that's a question for next month's preview show. So 5 months, it's a little bit of a quick turnaround for Merab. And you also add that there's rumours that Umar's been having issues with his arm. So you got two guys here who maybe aren't 100%. Bearing this in mind, why do you think the UFC are choosing to book this fight now? Is it them wanting Umar fighting before Ramadan? Or are you one of those cynics who think they want the belt off Merab ASAP?
I think it's more the first one, being honest. I don't think they want Merab as champion, but I think at the same time they know I think you could say it's a mix, but I think the big factor is the first. I don't know. I think Merab's kind of fun, if I'm being honest. I had fun with the title fight in Noche UFC. I don't know if anyone else did, but
I think it might be not so much Merab. I think there's something with Serra-Longo. I don't know if one of them two have said something to the UFC brass, but the company seemed to really have it in for their fighters. Because, I mean, you look at the way they treat Aljo when he was champion, the way they treat Merab now. I know there's this flyweight guy, I can't remember his name, but there's a really highly hyped flyweight prospect who trains with Serra-Longo. And he's not even getting a call to the UFC, even though he's like a regional champion. So I think there's something with that weight class.
It's got to be something with that gym. Have they treated Weidman bad recently?
Well, I mean, I was going to say they put him against Eric Anders, but I'm not sure how much of a punishment that is.
I mean, well, no, man, they must hate. Well, I know like Matt, Sarah, and Dana aren't super cool anymore. They used to be like really cool, and it doesn't seem like they're very cool anymore. So maybe there's something there. But at the same time, I also go like maybe I don't know. It definitely seems like they just do not like the Sarah Longo guys at all right now.
I bet it's Dana regretting putting Sir in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's like should never done it. Should never done it. He's a goof. We can look. If I, maybe it's because they look too similar. They're both like always accusing each other of jocking the other's style. No, short sleeve t-shirts and a bald head is mine. And Sarah's like, what are you talking about? I'm doing this thing knocked out Matt Sarah. Like, or this thing knocked out George St. Pierre. You know? And like they're probably like both just like going at it like that all the time. Um, maybe I don't know. Maybe maybe Dana was like, you should have your fighters get on one knee so they can't get kicked by Sean O'Malley. Stupid Dana, why would you? Rich Franklin told us that, and they probably did it. Um, like that's still my favorite Matt Sarah moment. Uh, can't kick you, can't kick you from here. But um, I mean, I think it's mostly like I'm sure I'm still rooting for Umar here, but they probably also were like, "Oh, we want Umar to win, and we think he's going to, hopefully. So if he wins, then like we at least got him as a champion before Ramadan, so we don't have to wait even longer for it. But at the same time, I think it's more like the Ramadan thing. Like you kind of want to get it done faster. I feel like you kind of have to, sadly. They're much more like around. There's a lot of fighters that are out of commission during Ramadan, which is 110,000% understandable. I'm not critiquing that at all. I hope that no one interpret. I don't think anyone will interpret that, but just in case. Um, and I think so. I think there's definitely that there. You kind of have to kind of plan around that for sure. Um, yeah, that's probably part. I feel like that's got to be the big thing. Um, but it's kind of funny too because like they don't seem to like Marab very much. But I mean, Umar is the same level of excitement for me. So
And personally, I get why people don't like Merab, but I just think that sort of cardio, like you can't say the Merab is inactive. Yes, it's grappling heavy, but I just love the fact that it's just such a fast, sustained pace that it just keeps going and it breaks people. Like Piotr
mhm.
Jan is up there as one of the most technical bantamweight fighters in this division right now, and
Yeah.
Merab absolutely whitewashed him. Like that was one of the
Oh yeah.
most impressive performances.
One of the most impressive I've ever seen. You know. Um, and let's be honest, there is look at Sean O'Malley at the beginning of the fight and then in between rounds. Just
It broke him.
he didn't want anything to do with that fight. Like he was done. Like, and I know people give them like the final round, and I just go, yeah, sure, you can. He can let him have it. Like if I'm sure he needs it for his mental sake. Um, and now Sean O'Malley's like, well, I think I won that fight. Oh my God,
We're going back to that sort
someone
of
dropped him.
Jamal Hill UFC fighter self belief again.
It's got to be like that or Tim Welch is like, no, I won it all. You definitely won that fight. Um, and but yeah, I mean, he was getting like slapped. He was getting kissed on the on his back. He was getting taunted. I think one of my favorite moments is Marab on top, dominant position. He hears the thank, thank, thank from the 10 seconds and he goes, nah, he's fine. I can just let him up here. He just walks up. I won the round. It's fine. Like, that's one of the most disrespectful things of all time. And, like, it just shat. Like, there's something about that fight that is just such a, like, masterpiece of, like, how to punk out your opponent. Like super. Like they literally should just call him the bully. Honestly, like and then they call him the machine, but he felt like a bully there. He was one round away from like finding a toilet and like giving like O'Malley a swirly. It felt like it was insanity. Um, yeah, it's a wild. And yeah, I think like, and I mean, Umar is very good. I mean, Umar's last win is very good too. The Corey Sandhagen one's a big one, huge one, especially because I thought Sandhagen was going to beat him. But I'm also a big Sandhagen guy. So, uh, I'm and I legitimately wonder though. I think Umar's incredibly good, and I think he deserves this fight. But how much hype from the UFC and the fan base is because of his last name? If his last name was Umar Smith, are we
I can see where
are
you're
we as
coming
pumped?
from there. I can.
You know?
Because I know one of the big talking points about this fight has been Merab saying that he feels that Umar hasn't done enough to earn the title fight. Because I can understand where Merab's coming from with this. Merab was somebody who had to win, 10, 11 fights in a row to get his
Yeah.
title shot. And then when he managed to get it, he did so arguably with all of the, I wouldn't say the odds stacked against him, but it was very clear the UFC wanted Sean O'Malley to win. Main event of Noche UFC. He's the big sort of like media darling, and like the UFC was sort of like framing Noche UFC around him as the headliner. So I can understand where you're coming from with Merab. He manages to get the belt, and the guy he's facing is someone who has one top 10 win. I do understand where he's coming from. With that being said, with some fighters, you can tell, even if they don't have the ranked wins, they have something special about them. Umar, for me, is one of those guys.
He's one of those. Yeah. He's I mean, there is 100% something special about him. Because I love Brian Kelleher, big one of my boys probably. Um, if I had more room, he would be in the stable. It's kind of where I'm at with him. Um, that what is he's one of the unhoused boys. We need something for him, like a little shelter for Brian Kelleher. But yeah, beats Brian Kelleher, Howney Barcelos. We talked about earlier. Beat him with the knocked him out, hits him with the body kick, then punches him. It's pretty sweet. Uh, then like this, like they know those aren't like insane names, but the Corey Sandhagen one was a big step up in competition and very impressive. So there is something. I agree 1,000% when you say there is something special about this guy.
And I think as well,
You know,
the other issue he had was I don't think there was anyone else you could give outside
the
of
title
that,
fight too.
because
Yeah.
you can't really go Piotr Jan because
Mm-hmm.
he's just got the one fight winning streak.
Song Yadong fight.
No, it's Song
Yeah.
Yadong, and then he beat Figueiredo. Plus,
Oh, he did just beat Figueredo.
plus
That's right.
also it's quite recent to him beating.
Rob just smashing him.
Yeah, so it's too fresh a matchup to run that fight back. I don't think people are too interested in the Sean O'Malley match again. You can't give it to Sandhagen, he's coming off a loss, so I think you kind of
Yeah.
got Umar by default.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I don't understand who they would have done outside of Sandhagen. I know that was like a big thing. Was Rob was like, why are we giving him a title fight? Well, who else is there? Like, and I say that as someone who still thinks from the top to bottom, bantamweight is the best division in the UFC. I think it's the best division in the world. Uh, but problem you kind of have is Marab's kind of ran through everybody. You know, uh, it's like he had a really hard road to the top, and like, and everyone just keeps beating each other too. So this is sadly a division where you can get a title fight by having a 2 fight win streak. But what stops Piotr Jan is, of course, the Figgy fight wasn't that long ago, even really. That's a big thing too. That happened like a month or so ago. It was like November, wasn't it, or was it early December? I don't know. But on the flip of that, you also have like the fact that you know like Sandhagen probably should have had a title fight at one point, but Umar beat him. Okay, you know, Pito Vera is not near a title fight at this moment in time, so tough luck if you're a Sean O'Malley defender.
To
Um,
be fair, he
and
wasn't near a
like
title shot when he first got the title shot anyway.
it was a let's have a I,
It was like a
I
split decision against Pedro Munoz.
yeah, in a good fight. but come on, like God, he doesn't deserve it. Um, you know, it's kind of like this is like the best division, but everybody just keeps beating each other. You know, I mean, T.J. Dillashaw came in and hurt the division here. Aljo's gone, so here's Aljo. Like Aljo would have been an interesting name, but obviously him and Merab would never fight. Um, but like it's just kind of we're Cejudo recently he's been like a little bit more active lately, but Merab beat him too. like, um, look if you just like look at the list of people Merab's beaten, this way to getting a title fight, you go, ooh, all right, like Piotr Jan, Aldo, which that's where a lot of people don't like Merab is the Aldo fight, and I hate that fight. I hate that performance. I hate any Holly homing. I won't stand for it. And but it's rough. But Piotr Jan, Cejudo, Sean O'Malley, it's like Aldo. It's like, oh, those are four guys. I'm sure people are probably like, oh, Mario Batista, but I don't know if anyone actually thinks he beat Aldo personally. Like, to be honest, that was just a bad decision.
Poor guy still gets hate online for that.
I feel bad for him. Because he's considered a hated fighter now, and it's like because you fought Mooring against the greatest ever, and you were gifted a decision. Like, you got to be honest, the first part is the only thing he's at fault for, and that's totally fine because he fought a smart fight. It was a fun fight. I don't think it was a boring fight. Like I think it was a fun fight, you know. And he doesn't control the judges being bad, right? Like, and I understand him thinking he won, but I don't think like the judges were just bad that night, you know. Waldo's lost a lot of like iffy decisions. It's fine, you know, or he's lost two I can think of actually. But still more than it should be. Judging is bad. Judges are going to judge, and they're bad at it. So, just, like, I don't think it's his fault. I feel bad for the guy.
So people see that
sure.
surname, Nurmagomedov, and they instantly think this guy is just going to be shooting for takedowns. He's going to get you down, daggy handcuff, and just dominate you. You watch Umar Nurmagomedov fight though. There's a reason they call him the Flashy Dagestani.
He's throwing spinning back kicks. He's throwing spinning back fists. He's got flying knees. He's a big time kicker. He lets the hands go when he has to. But like at the big, he still is a great wrestler. Like he still does fight. Like Sandhagen fight, he was using his striking to set up the wrestling, and then he started winning the striking because of his wrestling was so dominant. You know, definitely that he definitely has the dual threat. If you're building a strike or if you're building a wrestler, very few guys that are wrestlers can just power double their way to it. Even the legend himself, he who shall be praised, Gelton Almeida, understood that you need at least one strike that's very good to get the fight to the mat. And that is the teep kick for him. Other great wrestlers, such as like George St. Pierre, he had his jab, he had his left switch kick to the head. He developed a very good right hand near the end of his career. And that was able to help him with his power double. Makhachev has been striking a lot more, which helps him out a lot. There's only like one guy who's a very, very good wrestler that is just a power double, and that's like Shemaev. But like,
and we saw what happened. What happened when he was forced to trade with Gilbert.
Yeah, and it was a brawl, and it was awesome.
And he got dropped.
Yeah, and he was one soccer kick away from 2 careers ended in a moment. Oh, that's one of my favorite moments of all time because you see Gilbert is in the moment. He's not thinking about the rules. He's just like he's in the fight or flight, kill or be killed moment, and he thinks about it, and he pulls back. And I'm sure I would love to look into that reality where that kick landed because I still stand by. Shemaev never would have been the same if that would have landed. He would have got knocked out. Never would have been the same again, and it would have ended Gilbert's career because of it. 2 careers gone like that. But
I picture something like C-3PO when he loses his head in Star Wars.
It's a very good one. That's a good analogy. Um, I like that one too. I think that's a good one to name. There's a couple that's horrifying, but going back to it, like Marab himself has some strikes that he'll use to open him up and then pressure and then get the takedown. Khabib had that, and Umar will like just strike to set up a takedown. He'll just strike with you, and then he'll shoot a takedown, and it really makes it hard for someone to kind of get a rhythm against him. And that's where I think he's best is Sanhagen, who was a rhythm fighter, probably the epitome of rhythm in the UFC right now. Because once he gets his rhythm going, it's really hard to stop him. And then Umar just is all about you're not allowed to have a rhythm with him. He is anti-footloose, you could say.
I think if there is one
And
weakness when it comes to Umar, though, is I agree with you. The wrestling, it's up there with the rest of the family. The striking, very flashy, great use of kicks. I do think there's weaknesses in his boxing, and even Khabib said it's something that he needs to work on. Because the one that a lot of people will go to is him getting dropped by Beckmat very early on in the start of their fight. And it also leads me on to something else I've noticed when it comes to Umar, which is he is very happy to stand and trade when he's got the advantage, when things are going his way. The moment there's any kind of adversity, then it's like, okay, I've had me fun now, we're just wrestling.
he enjoys striking.
Yeah.
And that could be a double-edged sword for him. Luckily, he's fighting Merab, who doesn't have like that one punch blast kind of power. I mean, you're a professional fighter. Everyone can have a flash of one punch power. So, but like unless you're Colby Covington, like you're not. Like that's the only guy I can think of that is.
Well, who was the guy that Colby dropped? He threw like a spinning back fist and dropped him.
Oh, I don't think it was. I remember him lighting up.
Was it Rocco Martin?
Robbie Lawler was Rocco Martin, but I remember him lighting up Robbie Lawler on the feet. But that's more of just output and Robbie being, near the end of it. But I mean, really, Colby isn't like putting guys down with like shots ever. I mean, I feel like, like Bisping had a critique for being pillow-handed for a long time. Like, but he knocked out Luke Rockhold clean. Like, so is everybody else. Still did it. Rob could definitely put the lights out on Umar because professional fighters being at the highest level, it's kind of how it is. We've seen guys who we've critiqued as pillow hands get a one-shot belter of a KO before. So that could happen, but it's just not likely. I think I do think that's a good point. That is definitely a weakness is the boxing of Umar. And I don't necessarily think that like I mean do you think there is a weakness of Merab though? Like I mean I think his style he obviously does have weakness. There's no flawless fighter. Unless your name is Aldo or GSP, you're without flaw. And
I think the big flaw that Merab has is just the lack of finishing instinct. I think just the style that he has doesn't work with somebody who finishes fights. And I think that becomes a problem with him when he's facing someone like Umar, because we all know the way that Merab's going to fight, because he's done the exact same thing to all of his opponents. It's using his wrestling and using the takedowns. He'll get you down, let you back up, and then take you down again. So he's exhausting you and he's wearing you down over time, and he breaks people over 25. The concern I have from his perspective is you're fighting a guy who has equal, if not better, wrestling than you do. From what we saw in the Sandhagen fight, Umar has the cardio. I think Merab can break Umar, but if he does, it's going to be in round 4 or round 5. And by that point, I think Umar's built up a big lead and could easily get the fight. Because I don't think Merab has that finishing instinct. He's not going to sub. He's not going to ground and pound Umar.
He might leave his deck open sometimes too for the guillotine. I feel like sometimes it's kind of there. I mean, obviously there's the Ricky Simone moment, but I feel like I remember a couple of fighters trying to latch onto that neck and getting kind of close at times. But It could be just getting mixed up. I think that is definitely a real possibility here. Is if Umar gets ahead, then Merab has no way back out from underneath it.
So are we going to be leaning towards Umar with this one?
Nah, I still pick Merab. I got to be honest. It's funny. All these things we say, it really sounds like if Umar is the favorite, I totally understand, and I 10% get it. Anyone picking him, have a hard time picking against the champ here. I don't know what it is. I don't know. It'd be really interesting to see someone out wrestle Nurmagomedov, though. I will say.
That's one thing I will say is I think this could be the first time that we see somebody trying to take down a Nurmagomedov.
Yeah,
Cause
and that's gonna be kind of fun.
yeah, because Merab's not gonna. Because I think if it's a stand-up fight, if Merab tries to keep the standing, he's going to get pieced apart. Umar has a big advantage. Merab just needs to do the same thing he always has done and just hope that he can break him.
That'd be really kind of fun. I mean, we said that about Cejudo.
We did. Like, a lot of
You know,
people... Like, I still agree. I still think that Henry had the striking advantage over Merab. But Merab just stuck to the wrestling. And again, like he did with every other fight, he broke Henry by the end of the third.
yeah.
It's going to be a really interesting fight. And I think it's disappointing this fight seems to be kind of an afterthought to the fan base. And again, I wonder if that's because it is Umar and it is Merab. Because you're thinking, oh God, another Nurmagomedov. And oh God, the wrestling heavy guy who just sort of grinds people out against the fence.
Yeah, it definitely could be.
It's a shame. It's a shame.
Yeah, this fight I think is really good, and I think if this fight was the main event, I'm all over this card still. So like if they just moved everything up one, or Rob is main event, Makhachev, Tsarukyan isn't on the card, but Peyton Talbot opens up the card or something like that, or second fight or something. I'm like, yeah, I'm so in. It's great.
I think
Because this fight is awesome.
it's a great fight, but I do think Coleman's the right place for it. So now we come to our main event of the evening. Hopefully we won't be spending too long on this one because it's nearly midnight round here and I have drunk all the coffee in the house. It is Islam Makhachev who is going to be defending his lightweight title up against the man he beat in 2019, Arman Tsarukyan. So let's go back to that night there. It took place in Moscow in 2019. Now bonus points for you, Joe. Can you tell me who headlined that card?
Still muted. I can. It was Overeem and Alexander Oleinik.
Well done. Did you have that written
Yeah.
down or was that off the top of your head?
Neither, I can say.
Ha.
Right here. I have it. I pulled it up right here. Sometimes I whenever we'll do a little behind the curtain, I'll pull up a fight. Like I'll be like, okay, I have all my notes here, but in case I need to reference a specific fight that I just thought about talking about, or if it's like, I can't notate everything I'll talk about. My notes are very vague, so I can make it more natural for the camera. So sometimes I need to reference something that I don't have here.
Because honestly, I think if we had like a Morning Combat-esque production or we were like Helwani and we had like loads of producers lifting things up for us, we could get away with saying, oh yeah, we've learned this off the top of our heads. We're not. We're just a group of nerds sitting in front of a computer. We're just sort of like jotting down notes between ourselves. So let's go back to that fight though. So the big intrigue, which is played into this upcoming fight as well, was that Islam Makhachev fought Tsarukyan on, I think it was, a week's notice. This was Tsarukyan's UFC debut. He was, 22, 23 years old. A lot of people expected Makhachev. He had, like, the Khabib buzz around him. He had the fanfare. And that turned into a much more competitive fight than anyone expected. And a lot of people thought, hey, you know what? Give Tsarukyan a few years to round out his game. A few more years to mature, grow into his body a bit. I'm interested to see what could happen this time around. Now we're here. What is going to happen?
Now we're here, and he's arguably the scariest guy in the division, you could say. Because he turned Charles Oliveira into Ric Flair with all the blood and the bleached blonde hair in a very good fight, honestly. Obviously, it was UFC 300. It wasn't going to win fight of the night, knowing what we know now in hindsight. But very good fight. Um, runs through Benny, just blitzes him and blasts him. There's a very, very close fight. And honestly, one of my favorite fights of 2022 with Matush Gamrot. Fantastic fight. He's finishing guys. He has a dynamic striking game, and he also has a very good. What's the word I'm looking for here? He has a dynamic strike, very fun striking game, and incredible wrestling and grappling. He's seeming like the real deal right now, and it's crazy because he gave Makhachev a very close fight, a very competitive fight, and I think he arguably beat Gamma personally. So definitely a scary, scary guy right now to fight, and I'm sure Makhachev and their camp are very confident going into this fight. I don't know if this is the guy to be that confident against.
And what is it that's made you so confident? Is it the improvements in his striking? Is it his physicality?
It's got to be the improvements to his striking and just how much more crafty he is on the ground. Like, Carlos Oliveira had him in two very tight submissions. He remained calm. His maturity has really evolved. I that's probably the big thing is he's matured. He had all the tool. He had a lot of tools coming into the UFC. Now he's matured and rounded out his game. And he stayed relaxed. He was calm. He fought his way out, and he went right back to work once he got out of those submissions and just put the hammers down with elbows and shots. He has a lot of power. It's deceptive. He can hit you off of a blitz. He's very quick. Very quick, I feel like. Him and Gamrot is both of those guys just showing off their speed and well-rounded games for 25 minutes nonstop. And his cardio's solid. It's definitely like he's not necessarily, I'm going to say, a big-time kicker, but he's a very good kicker.
His body kicks are brilliant. I love his body kicks.
Yeah, I love. Me too. I'm always a sucker for a good body kicker. I blame the boss fandom of me, but love his body kicks too. Because I believe it was a body kick into punch setup that set up the knee against Dariush, if I remember correctly. But I think this is the guy that arguably, as much as Makhachev has improved since becoming the champion, even since being champion, he's improved a lot in his career. Tsarukyan has too, and he's probably made the same leaps. Like, these guys have been. It almost feels like, for me, we've been building up to this rematch for the title ever since they fought the first time. Like, it's very, very intriguing, and it's one of those situations where you go, "Wow, this greatness just kind of writes itself."
And also, as well, I just think there's a lot of similarities between the two, because we've had, if I remember correctly, I think they've got the same number of decision wins. Their last stoppage loss came in the same year, 2015. Like, if you use the old Mike Goldberg phrase, it's like virtually identical.
It's very funny, actually. They both like to kick for being big time wrestlers. They both have power in their punches. Like, that's actually very fun. It's definitely going to be a situation where I fear that if they touch before the fight, time collapses in on itself, and we have a time cop situation. But I don't think that'll happen because they have fought before and it didn't happen. So
one thing I do think that Makhachev does have over Tsarukyan, though, is striking defense. Because I don't know about you, I think that since Islam Makhachev, people always look for the comparisons between Khabib and Islam. Because obviously, both are trained by one another, Abdul Manap, Father's Plan, all that kind of stuff. There's a couple of big differences I've noticed, though. I think that Khabib was a lot more... Khabib used his sort of natural explosiveness to get the takedowns, whereas Makhachev's a lot more technical, a lot more trickier. And the other big one as well is, if you go back and watch Khabib's early UFC fights, that is not a high level of striking. Like, Makhachev, his level is a lot better, and he's a lot more risk adverse. Like, the guy just doesn't put himself in positions to get hit.
Khabib kind of, like, everyone asks, like, oh, who's who's better? Are they the same fighter? And it's like, no, they're a lot different from each other despite having similar game plans. And I do think, well, who knows? Maybe Makhachev goes on like a 7-year title reign or something. But I think in the grand scheme of things, Habib was better. So at least at the time of recording, of course, things change in the future. But they are very different as well. I think you made a great call outs there. Makachev feels like the more technical, risk adverse, more try-esque in his cerebral assassin kind of view.
I don't like what Try said.
I don't like what Try said. Try. This was Try. This was Town. But I do think here, like, Habib was very much a bull in a china shop kind of styling, which I personally loved. But I know some people that probably weren't the biggest fans of Habib. I loved Habib personally in terms of watching him. Just pure aggression all the time, even if that meant I'm gonna eat a spinning wheel kick from Edson Barboza and then go tend to take you down again. And fun fact, that was actually one of the most hyped moments in the, like, not to brag about how much of hardcore fans he were, but my friend who I dedicated the first retro review for, he was over at the house. My best friend was here as well, and I think a couple other people were here. And the fight that we were all waiting to see was like, oh, Habib's back. Like, Habib's back from like all these injuries and missed weights. Like, we really want to see a Habib fight, and blew us away with his performance in that fight. And we were like, oh, this guy's gonna be champion. And yeah, no, sure enough,
UFC
history kind of thing.
UFC 219, I believe.
I think so, actually.
We may be seeing that one again on the retro review in a few months' time, so I'll just leave that one there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. One thing I will
2017, yeah.
One thing I will say is, I do get the impression though. Another big difference is, I think Khabib was a lot more beloved than Makhachev. I'm not saying that Makhachev is unpopular. I think it's more sort of people respect how good he is rather than loving him. In the way that, like, Khabib had a big fan base, and I don't know if that was because of the zero next to his name, or whether that was people getting tired of Conor and him being the man who sort of shut down the Conor love.
Mm-hmm. Definitely could be part of it too. I think personally, yeah. I think that's a lot of it. I mean, I know for a lot of people, he made wrestling cool, so that's a big thing for me.
I thought that was Stone Cold Steve Austin.
It's fair.
Wrong kind of wrestling.
You got a great point there. Last time I checked, Habib wasn't breaking over a case of Nurmagomedov misers. Like, what I say? What?
Can you read any kind of concern?
This man is chicken. What?
Can you read any kind of concerns into? Because obviously, Makhachev's last fight was against Dustin Poirier. And I don't know about you, I think a lot of people, and I include myself in this, just thought that was going to be a whitewash. Like, Dustin's getting this fight off his name value and being in the right place at the right time. And Dustin, to his credit, made that fight a lot more competitive than anyone thought it would. Was that Makhachev having an off night? Was that maybe him sort of not being motivated? Or was that Dustin just sort of like putting everything into this last chance and just fighting the fight of his life?
I think Dustin is a tough fight for anybody at any given time, personally. I think he's just going to be one of those guys that has anyone like just ran through Dustin, like post resurgence and like post becoming a brawler, or like leaving the brawler behind and just kind of coming into his own. I guess post Michael Johnson KO.
Gaethje?
I think that fight was competitive in the first round before the kick. I don't think anyone's just ran through him ever. So I think that's kind of part of it. The other side is it definitely isn't a good look for Islam. I don't think it's a good look for that to happen. I think another thing that people don't talk about with Islam is his title defenses. So first one, Volkanovski, you know what? As much as I don't, in hindsight, I don't like the matchmaking, I can't act like I don't think Volkanovski still won that fight. And I think that's one of my favorite fights of all time. I think it's one of my favorite title fights of all time. I from every angle, I unbelievably adore that fight. I love that fight, except for why it happened. Um, it's great, fantastic fight, fantastic moments in it. One of my favorite final rounds ever. All that mess. But then he fights Volkanovski again on short notice. It's kind of not the same. It kind of leaves you like not feeling great, especially it's like, this guy's coming up from featherweight again to fight you. And yeah, you beat him, but like you beat him in one round. But like it kind of leaves like a sour taste in your mouth 2 times now in a row. And then here's Dustin just giving it 3 title defenses, all with a little bit of sour taste in my mouth. And I wonder if that's soured him for a lot of people personally, because it hasn't quite yet soured him for me, but it's definitely a little frustrating, you know, that whole gym, that whole culture of like we're the greatest ever. Makhachev's the greatest fighter on the planet. It's not even close. We'll never have any issues ever winning a fight when you have that kind of 3 sour tastes coming in. So I personally am kind of seeing the cracks there, but at the same time, it's really hard to see it in terms of his fighting ability as well. So it's kind of odd, if that makes sense. I don't know if that made 100% sense, but I hope you can see where I'm
I
coming
can
from
see
there.
where you're coming from. And I do agree to an extent, because like I'm already seeing a lot of the Abdul Manap team acting as if Makhachev's cleaned out the weight class, when I think
Yeah.
there are still a lot more options that you can still go to in lightweight.
Hmm.
Where I get a little bit unsure about, and like everybody's been doing this kind of hot takes in regards to 2025. One of my bigger hot takes is I can see this, either this fight or a potential Charles rematch. I think is going to be Makhachev's last fight at lightweight. Now, whether or not he moves up to welterweight or he retires outright, I think they're already setting the stage for Usman Nurmagomedov to come in and basically be his sort of heir apparent. I think Makhachev's days at lightweight are numbered. Whether that's retirement or welterweight, I don't know.
I think so too. I definitely. I mean, I know he's teased fighting at welterweight before.
But even then, I think the wording is throwing people off, because people are acting like welterweight is imminent. What he's actually said is, I'm more likely to fight Shafkat than I am Tupuria. That can be interpreted
Uh,
differently.
yeah. That makes a lot of sense to me. Could you imagine Poirier Makachev?
Well, we've already had Poirier and Makhachev. Tupuria, you mean?
Did I say Poirier?
I would
Poirier?
love to,
It's a Poirier.
like, if there were no belts involved, I'd love to see that fight. But,
But there's belts involved. I hated.
yeah, I don't like double champs. I've never liked double
Them too.
champs.
Yeah, I've definitely become soured on it for sure. It was really cool when Volkanovski did it the first time, not the second time. Um, and it's just kind of how it is.
I just think it stalls weight classes, and it's not fair on the other contenders.
Mhm,
Because I know they were teasing the idea of Whaley going up to fight Chev, and I was thinking that, like, how unfair would that have been on Manolfero?
mhm. It's like we're gonna have Juliana Pena fight Valentina Shevchenko. Oh my gosh, no! Please, anything but this.
You
Anything.
think you're special? You do.
That one would have to just be like roll and roll and roll, and we'll just play that one. I guess another Limp Bizkit song.
Or the copyright-free
Uh,
one. You've done it now. You've gone and made a big mistake. Actually, they would have done.
that's actually pretty. That's actually pretty funny. I like that one. Um, yeah, I. This fight is super interesting, and I think this one is also another pick'em. That's 3 in a row. I mean, that's a good matchmaking. They must have heard that I nominated them for Dumbass of the Year last year, because so far, the first pay per view of this year has been wow, 3 pick'em fights in a row. Like it's really good, and and I think even the opener is a pick'em fight to an extent. Um, are they all pick'em fights? Like, is there anyone that's like? I mean, honestly, this whole card feels like pick'em,
I
really.
mean, I've seen minus
Um,
400 for Makhachev. I think the bookmakers are giving him a much more of a. They think it's much more clear
yeah,
cut than you think. And I have to be honest,
I think it's a pick'em personally.
I feel the same way as the bookmakers though.
Oh, really?
I think Tsarukyan is very very good, and he has made a lot of improvements since that first fight. I have concerns over the cardio, and I still think that everything Tsarukyan does, Makhachev does a little bit better. I'm gonna
Yeah.
pick Makhachev to win this one. I think you take the over 2.5, and I'm gonna say fourth round submission.
Okay. I'm picking Sarukian here by decision.
How do you think he does it then?
I think by decision.
Like, what would you say is like
I,
the?
I,
Is he gonna like piece him up
I
on
don't
the
think
feet,
he.
out wrestle him?
I think he's gonna be able to take away the calm of Makachev with his kind of his striking style. I think his speed. I think his speed is like the big thing here. I think he's faster than Makachev, and I think speed is something Makachev has not necessarily struggled with, but I think has given him a little bit of trouble in the past. And I think he's faster than Volkanovski. Volkanovski was quick, but not like a blitzing, a mega blitzing on the feet. Whereas like this guy Surukian is very very quick, and I think he can help stalemate the grappling and wrestling to a point where it's going to get decided by who's on the feet going. I think the cardio is the big question for Sarukian, but I also think it's funny, despite Makhachev probably being the more prolific finisher. I think Sarukian. For some reason, my brain is kind of saying Sarukian's the more of a finishing threat in this fight. And I don't know if that's because I've watched that Adriano Martinez KO this week, so that can be part of it. But I am picking Sarukian here by decision, and I wouldn't be surprised if it goes either way. But I am picking Sarukian.
Well, that's a big boast from Joe Neal there. We'll see whether or not it comes out to be true. I think the big thing with these preview shows, though, Joe, like if you are the one guy who gets it right, you can sit there and say, I told you so.
Mm-hmm. That's why. That's why I I'm still riding the high off of me telling everybody for like in a year in advance, like Chris Weidman's gonna
You've
beat
been
and
you've been living off
finish.
that for a long
And
time.
I've been riding that. That's how I got the job. I told you that in my resume. I was like, you can ask some friends, but bro, I've told some people that Weidman was gonna beat Anderson Silva a year before it happened, and I said he would finish him. I didn't mean like that though. I'm gonna say I thought he would finish him on the ground, but well, yeah, I'm still riding that high though, and I love it.
Why? Wyman versus Silva was one of the fights that you covered on the Retro Review series. It was actually one of the first Patreon requests that we had. And if you do want to get involved with the Retro Reviews, then send them to patreon.com/It's Not Cage Fighting. Make your request over there, and me and Joe will eventually get to it. We have been having some tech issues on that front, but we're hopefully
Yeah.
going to get those sorted. And speaking of the Retro Reviews, Joe, we have one which will hopefully be coming out at some point on this month. Now, UFC 311 is hopefully going to be taking place in Los Angeles. So we gave people a selection of classic events which took place at the former LA venue, which was, of course, the legendary Staples Center. So we had 4 events lined up. One of them was a landslide winner of the poll. Which one, Joe, will we hopefully be getting at some point over the coming weeks?
We had 4 cards. We had UFC 60, which was my personal vote, which had Hughes and Gracie. We had UFC 104, which I have a lot of fond memories of as well. Machida Shogun, and then Cain Velasquez versus Ben Rothwell. In the co-main event, we had UFC on Fox, Shogun versus Vera, which had Machida and Bader on it, as ironically enough. And then UFC 184, which I do have a fun story about as well, but I've told I think like 5 times it feels like on the channel, so probably won't tell it again if we did a richer review on it. But what card was going to be the one that was out on bail, fresh out of jail, California dreaming? It was UFC 104. Machida versus Shogun is the one that is having all the California love here from the channel this month in January. Probably should not have used the out on bail, fresh out of jail line with the co-main event. Now that I say that, but that's kind of funny. Works out for the best. Um,
Which I will
my
say, I
favorite
was really
lines of that.
surprised that 104 was such a runaway winner.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I expected 184
Do,
to
do you
win,
think it was just
but I was rooting.
do you think it was just the infamy of the main event with the whole leg kicks don't finish fights meme?
Yeah, I think so. Leg kicks don't win fights, don't finish fights, whatever. See some people said that's a huge meme, and I think that's going to be part of it. The infamy is there. And 780 votes, a lot of votes, and I voted for 60 personally. The comments, yeah, like one of the comments here is first one right off the bat is leg kicks don't win fights, and then what's it called? Um, we had a person going, oh yeah, like you asked him and he didn't respond because someone was there at 60 and 104. 104, greatest robbery of all time. Machida Shogun 104. Uh, what's it called? Yeah, I mean, it's like it seems like it's definitely that main event was definitely the tipping point. I like UFC 60 because it's more of a more traditional, older school card. I think any fight or any card with double digits, is always a good pick. I think for the channel, but
I can't wait to
I definitely love
I can't wait to cover one of those like really early Suffer era cards. Like 31
yeah.
would be incredible to cover.
What's the? I can't wait to cover Tito Ortiz versus Vladimir Matyushenko.
Oh, you're the
Said no,
only person
said
that wants
no
that
one
card.
ever. Said no one ever. Don't make us do it, please. I should not have even made a joke about it because now someone's gonna do it if they hate me. Someone's like, I heard what you said about. Like, I know what you said about my favorite fighter. You're gonna have to be more specific. I talk a lot of crap on a lot of people's favorite fighters. Oh man.
Well, you are going to have a
But
say on the February poll. We have already got that one up right now. So, the middleweight title is going to be on the line over in Australia as Sean Strickland looks to try and regain his belt up against Dricus du Plessis. And we're going to be celebrating a middleweight legend on February's Retro Review. Now, this was one that Joe in particular pushed for big time, because we're not celebrating a former UFC champion, but he has been a champion pretty much everywhere else. Joe, who are we going to be celebrating in February?
the legendary, probably the best punch KO of all time, I still think. Dan Hindo Henderson, the H bomb, legend himself. I think he's a UFC champion personally because UFC 17 is on there. And I'm not to spoil anything, but for a card that's very old, it is a tournament and he got first place in it, obviously. But like that's a UFC champion to me. Like same way I counted Vitor pre Randy Couture punch. That slip of the eyelid.
So
Same way.
So do you count like Steve Jenham, Jerry Borlander?
Sadly, yeah, I kind of have to.
Harold Howard was robbed.
He was robbed. If you're not coming on,
Come on!
come on. One of the best of all time.
UFC 17 is one of our nominees for the Dan Henderson poll. There's 3 other choices. What are they?
We have Strikeforce Fajan versus Henderson, which is one of my favorite like back and forth fights. We have Strikeforce Fedor versus Henderson, which is huge fight, dream match for a lot of people. Very very cool that fight actually happened. I still have I have fond memories of that card, and I have fond memories of that night watching that card. But probably, in my opinion, what I voted for. That's it. Not to push it in the aether or anything, because it's going to take a lot of votes. 844 votes so far, and this is in second place by a good hit. But UFC 139, which is by far one of my favorite fight cards of all time. You get to see Crow Cop fight, sadly passes front. But you also get to have Kung Lee versus Vanderlei Silva, which is a very good fight. And then probably one of the best 5-round brawls I've ever seen in Shogun versus Hendo, a dream pride match years later. and somehow it delivers on every front. I think it's a fight that I sadly often forget about, and I probably would put in my top five ever fights, at least top 10. Um, and for my money, one of the first times I've ever seen Dan Henderson be knocked unconscious, but then luckily he wakes up like a second later. There's an uppercut he takes, and he like stumbles and then hits the cage, and it's like, I'm up. It's very weird, very shocking. With one of the scariest final rounds in a good way, like edge of your seat ever. I think that fight honestly are like I think that fight legitimately rivals Fury and Glover, as blasphemous as that may sound. Um, but check it out if you haven't, or vote for it.
Well,
Change your vote.
the poll is up right now. There is still time to vote for your choice there. Plenty of them to choose from there. I will say Fedor versus Henderson. If you do like your What Bars, which Joe hasn't done for a while, it's worth choosing that one simply because Misha Tate wears the most garish outfit you have ever seen on that card.
There is no way we don't what bar her. There's no way we don't. Like, we are gonna what bar her big time. I think the fact that we have what barred a couple of times on the show is pretty fun. I do loving hitting Phil Davis in that horrible Glover Teixeira fight. That's a fun one.
With me, it's just goalkeeper jerseys. Jake Ellenberger is Pavel Srdacek.
That's a good one. That's a good one. I miss what barring people. Yeah. This darn Reebok Venom era has robbed us, not just the fighters, more importantly us. Kidding. Of having garish, disgusting looking fight uniforms. And can you imagine Krokop fighting in today's UFC, not having his traditional Croatian pants? Disgusting.
Imagine like the early Reebok eras when it was just all black or all white, and like Chuck wearing all white.
Yeah. What about Rich Franklin? Like his classic Neapolitan ice cream look. That's what he was. I think it was a Neapolitan ice cream. He's the vanilla. He had strawberry and chocolate on him, on his trunks. He was. That's what my uncle used to say. It's like he's like a Neapolitan ice cream.
We could sit here and talk about chocolate and food all day. I am getting hungry. And I'm also getting very tired as well because we're nearing midnight right now. So it's a really good time for us to say our goodbyes. This has been the UFC 311 preview show. My name's been Karl Bainbridge. That's been Joe Neal. We are going to be back in just a few weeks' time as we preview UFC 312 and one of nature's greatest phenomenon, Zhang Weili, actually fighting. Bye-bye for now.